You just opened a Pandora's box for me. Because there are so many images. There's the rolling ball, there's the swordsman that Indiana Jones ends up shooting.
The Indiana Jones movies are beloved for many reasons, from Harrison Ford's everyman hero charm, to the deft balance between action, humor, and romance, to the reassuring feeling that, no matter what, Indy is always going to save the day. But it's also one of those franchises that is just full of iconic moments that are instantly recognizable, even to people who have perhaps never even seen the movie that these moments are from.
He chose poorly.
Now, with Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny hitting theaters for one last Dr. Jones adventure, we spoke to Harrison Ford and the cast of the film about their favorite Indy moments and why they're still classic after all these years. Perhaps not surprisingly, the first sequence from the first movie, Raiders of the Lost Ark, was the source of many of the cast's picks.
Oh, the boulder for me.
Yeah.
Indy running away from the boulder.
Yeah, I would say the same thing.
Of course, you remember that moment as well. Indy has ventured into a Peruvian temple in search of a legendary golden idol. Unfortunately for him, but fortunately for us, he triggers the temple's ancient booby traps and is forced to exact a thrilling and death-defying escape. It all culminates in a giant boulder heading right down Maine, with Dr. Jones the only pin in this deadly bowling ball's way. In fact, the boulder may have been made of fiberglass in real life, but it was still dangerous.
The overriding consideration was to be able to stop the thing. You know, if Harrison had tripped up or someone had fallen over and the ball was actually coming through, whilst it was a fiberglass ball, in fact, it was still very heavy and could actually do a lot of damage. And when Stephen first saw it, he was really very excited about the whole thing and immediately said, well, why don't we make it, another 50 feet longer, which of course we did.
There are conflicting reports on where the boulder idea originated. Legend has it that it started with George Lucas, who created Indiana Jones and produced the pre-Disney era movies. The way the story goes, Lucas got the idea of the boulder from a Scrooge McDuck comic. In the comic, Donald Duck and his pals discover a, legendary idol, only to trigger booby traps which result in a giant, deadly rock almost taking everyone out. But director Steven Spielberg has his own version of where it came from, namely, from him.
The ball was my idea where we were knocking out set pieces and making suggestions. I just said, at some point some huge boulder should start chasing Indy and almost squishes him 3 or 4 times until he gets out of the cave. And that was just something I thought up. But I didn't know it was going to look as good as that until the day Norman Reynolds showed me that he actually made a boulder that was something like 22 feet in diameter. It was extraordinarily large.
Either way, just like with Donald Duck and his friends, there was more to that sequence beyond a giant homicidal rock.
The entire sequence from the get-go until he starts running away from 2,000 native. It's such a roller coaster. It just goes up and down. It's so charming and so surprising.
Indeed, that opening sequence is filled with contenders for the most iconic Indy moment. Remember a young Alfred Molina playing Throw Me the Idol and I'll Throw You the Whip with Indy? Yeah, that didn't work out too well for the future Doc Ock. And then there's the point a bit earlier on where Indy just slightly miscalculated when pulling that idol off its pedestal.
The baggie of saying it and taking the relic, and then the moment of kind of relief. Everything's great. I got it, good, and then bam, there's this big old stone you have to run out, chasing after him. I think that's seared in my mind for sure.
Yeah, and that's all about Indy and his hunt for these relics. It's just, inspiring.
You can just feel those arrows whizzing past Indy's ears, but that's part of why the character connected as hard as he did when Raiders debuted in 1981, and why he has continued to ever since. It's because Harrison Ford plays Indiana Jones as a guy who feels every blow, grimaces with each hit, and is as scared as anyone else would be in such a situation.
Something I've always tried to do is to make sure that in that context of action, there's also character development going on. I want the audience to see the fear of a man who supposedly has no fear, who's fearless. Nonsense, nobody's fearless. I don't want to hear hero in the same context, with something I'm doing, because nobody's a hero until it has to be done. I want to be an ordinary person in extraordinary circumstances who behaves well.
ticket.
Of course, moments like this are memorable because of the real sense of danger they create. That, in turn, is thanks in large part to the practical approach with which they were filmed in the Indy movies. Look at how Ford really stumbles when he's running from the boulder. That little misstep brings a degree of believability to the scene that no amount of CGI could match. These are real actors and real stuntmen performing real things on camera, an approach that Indy himself has always valued.
When you lose human scale, when you see things that you do not that are not part of your human experience, when the laws of gravity, and science are not obeyed out the window, and anything can happen, you don't care as much somehow.
Indy's character was always a hero that was in over his head, so he was always getting himself hurt and in trouble, and he wasn't quite up to what he was supposed to be. What the old classic Republic serial hero was. And I think that's one of the things that came off the best.
It's also hard to pick just one scene or moment when it comes to the Indiana Jones franchise, and the cast of Dial of Destiny definitely had other favorites after the giant boulder.
It was the cup, and how it just got that everything, it really did mean that.
The last scene from The Last Crusade.
Yes. With the horses.
Yeah, with the horses and the sunset. I think it's really iconic too. And Last Crusade is my favorite movie. So.
Melting faces. I mean, there's so many.
Yeah.
There's the rolling ball. There's the swordsman that Indiana Jones ends up shooting.
For Ford, these iconic sequences, whether it's a rolling boulder or runaway minecart or a Grail Knight showing up for a hang, all have to serve a purpose that goes beyond simply thrilling audiences or giving Indy something cool to do. And that philosophy continues with Dial of Destiny, which brings Indy's story to a close.
In every film, there are many, many moments. Those moments are just moments in a chain of moments that are a story. I wanted to end my experience with Indiana Jones by telling the last part of his story, the part of his story where he's where we see the effect of the life that he's lived on him in a very honest way. And then I want to see him pull himself out of the mud one more time.
For even more on Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, be sure to like and subscribe to IGN.